Starting off this countdown, we have deja vu. We all know what deja vu is. I'm getting deja vu right now talking about it because I've done a video on deja vu before. But basically it's the feeling that something has already happened before, and scientists have struggled to explain what causes it. Well, there's a theory out there that deja vu occurs when different universes are in sync for a short period of time. For example, maybe you're in the bathroom and you grab your toothbrush. In another universe at the same time, maybe that version of yourself grabbed a hairbrush. Or in one universe you pour a glass of wine, in another you pour yourself a glass of champagne. Those things are happening at the same time, just with small differences. But you're in sync for that moment, and that's why you think to yourself, oh hey, I've done this before. Because in another universe, you just actually did. It's a crazy theory, but many believe it's true. I mean, for all we know, it is true. It's just hard to prove these things. Moving on at number 9, we have the dreams, and if you guys are liking this so far, then smash that like button because it really helps me out and I appreciate it and you're the best. Some scientists believe that dreams are actually glimpses into a parallel universe. By dreaming, you are seeing what yourself in another universe is doing. 1,000 years ago, mystics believed that dreams are what are happening in a parallel universe. But they also believe that this universe was home to ghosts and spirits. Well, over the years, scientists have agreed with this theory, minus all the ghost and spirit stuff. Well, this could explain why some people have had vivid dreams of places that they have never visited. Maybe that's because their other self was currently there visiting it. Or when you see something in your dream and then the next day it happens in real life. That has happened to me on a number of occasions. Either you're psychic or you got an insight into another universe when you were dreaming, and that's how you knew it was going to occur. Now, there is no way to prove this, but there's also no way to disprove this. In our 8th spot today, we have the Flintstones. Who loves this classic cartoon? That and the Jetsons were pretty iconic. Smash that like button if you agree. Now, the Flintstones are pronounced as so you would think it would be spelt as so. No, apparently it's the Flintstones with the hard T. I refuse to believe this. Now, you may be thinking, Lindsay, what's the big deal? Well, this is an example of the Mandela effect. I've talked about this before a lot. Basically, it's when a bunch of people remember something being a certain way, and another group of people remember it being a different way. The Mandela effect, for those of you who don't know, is named off of Nelson Mandela, because people clearly remember him dying in prison in the 80s when he didn't actually pass away until 2013. So theory goes that there are parallel universes out there. In this case, we have the Flintstones universe and the Flintstones universe. Over time, maybe our universes merged, which is why we have the memory of the Flintstones. The show was actually named that just in another universe. Little things like these are signs that multiple universes are out there. In our 7th spot today, we have the strange space signals. In spring of 2020, NASA legit thought they found concrete evidence of parallel universes. Basically, they detected some odd signals coming from the South Pole. It was so odd that they had no explanation for it besides parallel universes. So basically, they discovered that high energy neutrinos were coming up out of the Earth and headed to the sky. In fact, they found that this energy was coming up from the Earth instead of down from space. Now, this was weird for a number of reasons. The fact it was going up suggests that when the Big Bang occurred, it formed two universes, one that flows forward and the other in reverse, meaning the other universe is traveling back in time while we're moving forward. For them, the Big Bang represents an end, not the beginning. That is mind-blowing. In our 6th spot, we have Star Wars. This is another example of the Mandela effect, and it's going to make you freaking lose your mind. Who here is a Star Wars fan? Smash that like button or comment down below if you are. Well, even if you're not a fan, I'm sure you all have heard or seen that dramatic scene where it's revealed that Luke's father is, spoiler alert, Darth Vader. He goes, "Luke, I am your father." Wrong. Apparently, he never even said that, yet we all remember him saying the line exactly like that. And even huge Star Wars fans agree to this. Well, when you watch the scene, Luke says, "He told me you killed him," in regards to Obi-Wan telling him that Darth Vader killed his dad. Then Darth Vader replies with, "No, I am your father." So he never even says Luke, it's just no. What the actual heck? So again, people believe that this is a sign that we switched universes. In the other universe, the movie had Darth Vader say the line, "Luke, I am your father." In this universe, he did not. Mad at that one. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the black holes. This next theory was created by Stephen Hawking, and that dude was a freaking genius. So if he believes that black holes are a signal from a parallel universe, then maybe I do too. So in 2016, Stephen Hawking created a study in which he proposed that black holes actually lead to another universe, instead of just destroying everything that goes near them, it just transports you into another universe. Previously, it was said that anything that gets sucked into the hole will be destroyed and lost forever. But in this case, they would just travel through and pop out into another universe. Maybe that's why scientists are starting to discover weird space objects that look unlike anything from our universe. It's because they're coming from a different universe. Maybe Stephen Hawking is onto something, and black holes are actually portals. In our fourth spot, we have the simulation. In 2018, researchers ran a massive computer simulation that involved building a new universe under a variety of different conditions, and they discovered that universes could still be created even with less dark energy as ours. Study co-author Pascal Elahi said, and I quote, "Even in universes with 300 times as much dark energy as ours, life found a way. Our simulation showed that the accelerated expansion driven by dark energy has hardly any impact on the birth of stars, and hence places for life to arise. Meaning, other planets can exist in other universes, even if that universe was being torn apart by dark energy." He continued on saying, and I quote, "Even increasing dark energy many hundreds of times might not be enough to make a dead universe." They then went on to believe that aliens are living on planets in other universes. The reason we haven't found them yet is because they're in other universes, not ours. In our third spot, we have the pattern. A number of astronomers started picking up a weird signal coming from the sky. Basically, the signal will chime for 4 days, then after the 4th day, it'll stop. It will then stop for 12 days before picking up again and doing the same thing over and over again. It's thought that maybe on the days where it's not sending a signal towards us, it's actually sending a signal in another direction or to another universe. Some believe that this is coming from aliens or other life forms, or from people in another universe. If not, what else could it be? The signal is very consistent and they still don't have an explanation for it. In our second spot, we have the silence of the lambs. Here's another Mandela effect example that will make you lose your mind. Okay. All of you have better seen the movie Silence of the Lambs. If you haven't, you're not a true horror fan. Anyways, for some reason, we all remember Hannibal Lecter going, "Hello, Clarice." You know, that was my Anthony Hopkins impression. Pretty good one. And he says it in a really freaking scary way. But apparently, he never said that in the movie. He only has said good morning during their first meeting. This is not okay. I literally can picture him saying it right now. So here's another sign that there are multiple universes. There's a universe where Anthony Hopkins does "Hello, Clarice," and one where he doesn't. And in our number one spot today, we have the cosmic bruise. In 2017, cosmologists discovered a weird cold spot in the universe. After studying it, a number of people believe that this cold spot is a bruise that was left after our universe collided with another universe. Professor Tom Shanks in Durham University's Center for Extragalactic Astronomy said, and I quote, "One explanation for the cold spot is that it might be the remnant signal of the collision of our universe and one of the trillions of others." In fact, the team found 4 bruises, meaning that our universe has collided several other times in the past. Meaning, there has to be multiple universes out there.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have 2 phones. This story had my mind absolutely blown, but when I looked at the replies, it was brought to a whole new level. This story reads, quote, "Okay, I know this sounds a bit crazy. So to start off my story, my mom and dad are divorced and my dad just came to pick me up. But yesterday my mom got an infection somewhere in her lower abdomen. While my dad was driving to his house, my dad started to call my mom and she picked up. But they couldn't hear each other. So my dad hung up, but then like 20 seconds later we both got a call at the same time, but by 2 different numbers. We both answered, and on the other line was my mom. We started talking and she sounded the same, but like I said, they were 2 different numbers, and me and my dad are just sitting there looking at each other like, are we losing our minds? We started to talk to, quote, my mom, and she was saying 2 different things while we were both talking to her. And now I don't know if I'm losing my mind or what. Okay, so I was like, that story is really strange and I don't really have an explanation for what could have happened there. Then I look at the replies because you know who always has explanations? Redditors. And one user replied with their theory that this was a case of a temporary reality slip or merge. Like, what in the world is that? My mind is blown. In our number 9 spot today, we have the nap. This wild story took place in 2022, and it starts off with the storyteller explaining that in that year, they took a nap and woke up in 2014. When they woke up, they were on the couch at their old job in their old uniform on a break. They knew something was wrong and that they were back in time, but to make matters weirder, they were like their 2020 self and what they look like currently, but they were in the year 2014, if that makes sense. From here they wrote, quote, "I looked around and ran down the hallway when my manager stopped me and asked me what was wrong. I asked him what year it was and he said 2014. I insisted to him it was 2020. I ran up the stairs and everyone was looking at me. Everyone was acting like I worked there the last 6 years and nothing changed. Everyone asked me what was wrong. Then they head to the apartment that they lived in 2014 and it looked exactly the same, and their parents were there who also confirmed that the year was 2014 and also began asking what was wrong and what was going on. This is when the story takes the craziest turn though. They open their bedroom door and their ex is lying in their bed, but this ex is also the current 2020 version of themselves, not the 2014 version, and they too have this awareness that they're back in time. They then went on to write, quote, "They told me they," meaning the ex, "brought me back. They were fully aware of what was happening. After talking for what felt like days in our old apartment, they left, and I went back to sleep in my own bed and woke up back in 2020 in my bed." I truly can't explain what on earth happened here, but it definitely is unbelievable. In our number 8 spot today we have Parallel You. This strange story starts out with the storyteller setting the scene for us. They wrote, quote, "This happened about 5 years ago when I lived with my parents. It was about 5 minutes after 8 a.m. and I had woken up, went downstairs and sat in the recliner. Dad was sleeping on the couch and Mom was in the kitchen cooking breakfast, biscuits and gravy. Everything was normal." Okay, this sounds like a great time so far, but just wait. They then explained that they moved from the recliner to the dining room and then boom, suddenly they're at their friend Paul's house like they've been there the whole time. There are a couple other people there and someone who's underneath a jacked up car working on it. This is when they write, quote, "The guy underneath the car asked me to hand him the new muffler that was laying right beside where I was standing. I picked it up, I remember it had some weight to it, I recall the heat of the sun hitting me in the face, it was about 12 or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I knelt down to give him the muffler and the weight being lifted off when I handed it to him. It was just all so vivid." So now, when the storyteller went to stand back up, they heard this sound that was similar to the splash sound that occurs when somebody jumps into a pool. Immediately the sound then went into reverse and then there was a loud clap sound, and now they're back in their dining room. They go on to write, quote, "I looked around, looked at the clock and it was only 8:12. Dad was still on the couch, Mom was still cooking breakfast, and I went into the kitchen to ask her what that loud clap was. She gave me a puzzled look and said, 'What clap?' I covered it up by saying it must have been on TV, and I sat back down trying to process what had just happened, knowing if I tried to tell her what happened that she might think I'm crazy. So I dropped it and moved on with my day as normal. I have never had anything like this happen before or since." They finish off their post by saying that they think they might have transported temporarily to their body in an alternate reality, and to be completely honest, I have no other ideas of what could have gone on here. In our number 7 spot today we have Who Was That? Okay, I'm gonna need your opinion on this one and what you guys think is going on here, because this one has me a bit confused. So this post says, quote, "This happened about 2 years ago. So my fiance and I were lying down in the living room, his face is facing towards me and my face is towards him. My face is looking towards the wall behind him and his face is towards the living room space. On the verge of waking up, my mom walks from the kitchen to her bedroom, in which you have to pass the living room in between. She asks, 'Are you both okay?' asking from her bedroom. Not thinking much, my fiance and I both answer, 'Yes.' In that moment, I got confused because I remember my mom telling me earlier in the morning that she was heading to town and she wouldn't be back until the afternoon. I get up from the couch, go to check her bedroom, and there is no sight of my mom anywhere. I told my mom about this and she confirmed that she had been in town from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. My fiance and I still talk about this to this day and we are still freaked out about this." So my first thought was obviously a dream, but the fact that they both experienced it is the thing I can't get past. So what do you think happened here? Some sort of shared dream experience, something to do with parallel universes, some weird ghost thing? At this point, I have no idea. In our number 6 spot today, we have the train to nowhere. It doesn't matter what train you're on, where it is, or whether it's underground or above ground, when the doors close, everything is lawless. I feel like trains are always the portal to another world, and this story only proves my theory. This story reads, quote, "3 years ago I was riding a train. Got my ticket checked and took my seat. A few stops later, someone else turned up and seemed to have booked the exact same seat to the same destination. The same train conductor that checked my ticket earlier came, we compared our tickets, and it turned out I was booked on a non-existent train number with the same destination and time, but strangely enough, I had the same name as the one I shared a seat number with. Tried to check up on the number from my ticket afterwards and didn't get any hits for my actual train number." This is fully some platform 9 3/4 stuff that I cannot understand. In our number 5 spot today, we have Am I Really Here? Okay, this Reddit story starts off with the OP explaining that on February 20th, 2022, they dreamed that they were in a car accident. They then go into extremely vivid detail of the scenario that led up to the accident itself, and then the aftermath of it, and they could so viscerally feel all of the things as they were happening. Their car ended up in water and they found themselves unable to escape, and they explained the thoughts that flashed through their mind of their family. Their phone was nearby and they managed to call their girlfriend who didn't answer, and they left one last voicemail. It's all very detailed and horrifyingly sad, and they end it by writing, quote, "I remember crying to myself, trying to think of something else I could do to get out of this, to survive, but the water kept rising, and in the end I simply stared up through it at the faint flashing light at the surface, blue and red. I prayed until my vision went black and I couldn't fight to hold my breath any longer. And then I woke up, alone in bed, freezing with a cold sweat, but awake and confused. I don't know how or why I'm here, because I died. I felt my body die. I felt the water enter my lungs and the pain that it caused. I felt it all. I shouldn't be here." So this person thinks that they passed away in one reality and jumped into this one where that was all just a terrible nightmare. That is horrifying. That would be the most terrifying experience ever. Was this just a very vivid nightmare or an example of someone who jumped universes? In our number 4 spot today, we have The Real Me. Okay, this story is a bit of a longer one, but it's so worth it, I swear. It reads, quote, "I was shopping at a thrift store in a small town I lived in several years ago. I was looking around and happened to be near the checkout counter. An old lady came out from the back and said, 'Are you?' said my name. I said yes, figuring I'd worked with her or something in the past, although she didn't look familiar to me. My name is not super common anymore, although I do see it on personalized items on a very infrequent basis. She was really excited to see me. She asked if I was still working at a certain school in a neighboring town about a half-hour away. I was confused and told her I'd never worked at a school in that town or any town. She appeared confused and stated that we had worked at the school together for a long time. I politely said that she must have me confused with someone else. She seemed like she was kind of scared at that point and again asked if my name was what she had stated before. I said yes, and she said, 'Well, you look just like her.' We chatted a bit about this other person and I asked what this other person's last name was and gave mine. She said she didn't remember, but she could have sworn that I was her. We laughed about it and I finished my shopping and left. I didn't think much about this till a few weeks later when I was walking down a street near my house. A woman, not the one from the thrift shop, came out of her house, saw me, and asked if my name was, said my name. I said yes. She also became excited and asked if I was still working at the school in the nearby town. I again explained that she must have me confused with someone else. She also said that I looked just like this other person with the same name, and she also didn't know the other woman's last name. This actually did creep me out. I've been mistaken for other people before, but not twice in the same month for a person who looks like me and has the same name with the same spelling. I think it is possible another reality crossed briefly with this one, and this was the result. No one has mistaken me for this woman since. You guys, imagine how strange that would be. I swear I wouldn't go anywhere ever again. In our number 3 spot today, we have The Memories. Okay, this story starts off on June 16th, 2015. Our storyteller was really into visiting the skate park at this time and was on an out-of-town trip with their mom and ended up visiting a skate park while on this trip. While at the park, they unfortunately ended up getting in an accident that led to them being unconscious for a few minutes and having a few minor injuries such as broken ribs. It definitely could have been worse and they were lucky to walk away from the accident, but during their time unconscious, they experienced something that they refer to as the 7 minutes. During this period, they explained that their life flashed before their eyes and that they went through basically all of their memories and then it was black. When they woke up after some time, they began to realize that while everyone looks the same, no one shares any of the same memories that they now have. The ones they saw during the 7 minutes. They have also stated that they now have this ability to feel when a family member dies, and as an example, they explained that they told their mother of their grandfather's death 20 minutes before she got the call. I think that would have been a really weird conversation, but once the phone call came, it was likely quite eerie. In our number 2 spot today, we have A Bike Ride to Another Universe. This is a story that I have no explanation as to what could have happened, but when I first read it, it gave me that shivery kind of feeling. It was posted on Reddit and they wrote, quote, "I was 11, maybe 12. 2012. We lived on this large piece of land in the desert with a truck repair shop on it. Most of the time we'd hear the mechanic tinkering away in the shop, or our neighbor would be sitting out on his step. In the summer of 2013, I rode my bike out to the back of the property. There was a big hole with sheet metal covering it, and I liked to ride my bike across because it would make an awesome thunder-like noise. I had done it hundreds of times, but this time it was different. I rode across, and when my bike tires touched the dirt, I immediately felt different. Everything felt too silent. Everything felt static, like it was frozen. Like if I tried to move anything, it wouldn't move. I was honestly too nervous to ride back to my house. I felt like I would show up and everyone would be gone. Just missing. No people, no animals. I took a 15-minute break and just pedaled back. I always think about this. Maybe the vibration from the sheet metal was enough to create some sort of disturbance. Maybe being off in the back of the property by myself, but I loved doing that because nobody bothered me while I rode my bike. I never had any other experiences like that, and every time I went back to that part of the property, I would take my dog with me on a leash so I wouldn't be all alone. What do you guys think happened here? In our number 1 spot today, we have Breakfast in a Parallel Universe. Breakfast at Tiffany's or Breakfast in a Parallel Universe, this Reddit story honestly could be the plot of a movie. The Redditor wrote, quote, "My husband and I bought a country house, a place that we go to and work on most weekends. It's in a small town in Texas. One weekend we happened upon a restaurant that we had never noticed before. We entered and I remembered an older man, another customer with a cowboy hat on, said, 'You can just seat yourselves.' So we made our way to a little table that was open in the middle of the busy restaurant. We ordered breakfast, ate, and left. Everything seemed normal. 1 or 2 weeks later, we tried to find the same restaurant and never could find it. We drove all around the town and on each of the roads out of town and never found it. The building where I could have sworn it was boarded up and abandoned. The building looked the same but long deserted." I feel like this could either be like a cool drama or an awesome eerie thriller, you know? But either way, this story would have had me extremely confused and questioning a lot of things. It's crazy to me that they both experienced the same thing because it takes away a ton of other possible explanations. Starting off at our number 10 spot, we have The Close Call. This story comes from a guy who loves cars but had a weird moment about 15 years ago that he just couldn't get off of his mind. When he was in his early 20s, he loved to speed in cars and just wanted to go fast. His friend had a car that he really wanted to drive, and one day it just turned out to be his lucky day and his friend finally gave in. He hopped in the driver's seat with his friend who owned the car in the passenger seat and another buddy in the back, and off they went. They went to an empty freeway around 3 a.m. and put the pedal to the metal. Once they hit around 135 miles per hour, they began to see a bunch of semi-trucks. There were 3 basically driving side by side, taking up all 3 of the lanes and certainly not going as fast as our speed demon friend. He thought to himself that there was an on-ramp coming up and he would just use that as some extra room to pass, but unfortunately as he approached the on-ramp, another semi was entering the freeway and occupying that 4th lane. With all 4 semis lined up, he was approaching too fast with no time to brake, so he closed his eyes and prepared for the worst. But then, nothing happened. He opened his eyes and the other guys in the car were just as confused as he was. Somehow they were now in front of all of the semis, but there was literally no room for them to have passed by them. This was the end of his speeding career, as he was super spooked as to what possibly just happened. Was this a real world glitch, or did he somehow enter a reality where he wasn't in an extremely dangerous and potentially fatal situation? In our number 9 spot today, we have The Strange Storm. This story goes that a couple were at home just doing some household chores when something super strange happened to them. The husband went to open the front door to toss a dirty rug out of the house, and it was just completely pitch black outside. The weird part is that it was at 2 p.m. and from inside the house it looked like a regular sunny afternoon with light coming in from the windows. They said that suddenly outside the front door where it was dark, it's like the sun was a light bulb and it just went on, then off again, and then on. They described it like the flickering a light bulb does right before it's burnt out. The wife asked her husband if he had seen that and he replied, "Yes, what just happened?" They also said there weren't any clouds out either, so it couldn't have been a cloud blocking the sun. Were they transported to some alternate reality for a second? I honestly have no explanation for what the pair witnessed. In our number 8 spot today, we have The Disappearing Town. This story comes from a person who often commutes to a town around 3 hours away from the one that they live in. One day they were doing the 3-hour drive with their mom and they got to the part that takes about a third of the entire drive, and it's an area that just has a lot of like mountains and cliffs and nature. So the person telling the story is in the passenger seat and their mom is driving, and as they look out the side of the window over one of the cliffs, they see a small community that they had never seen before. The community looked nice, and it consisted of mostly bungalows, which is apparently not normal for the area. Both them and their mom were super confused as to how they had never seen this community before, but it gets even weirder. They never saw the community again. It just disappeared as quickly as it appeared. Did they accidentally drive into another dimension one day? In our number 7 spot today, we have slightly different. One morning in 2008, a woman named Lorena woke up in a life that was similar to the one she was living in when she went to sleep, but certainly not the same. At first, it was just things like her bed sheets and pajamas, but when she got to work, things began to escalate. Lorena realized that her office wasn't her office and that she worked in the same building, but in a completely different department. She had never even met her boss before, so she knew this couldn't have just been a moment where she got lost or confused. When she returned home after the workday, she was met by her ex-boyfriend, only to find out that he was apparently her current boyfriend. She tried to find the person that she had been dating for months, but he didn't seem to exist in this new life and world that she now found herself in. Lorena began to seek psychiatric help because she was fearing she was having some sort of nervous breakdown, but all the tests revealed that she seemed to be of sound body and mind. The strange occurrences continued when Lorena asked her family how her sister was doing. Lorena knew that her sister had recently had shoulder surgery and she wanted to check in, but when she asked her family, they were baffled by her claims and insisted that there was no surgery that had taken place on anyone in the family. Lorena couldn't find any answers to her situation and was having no luck with a medical explanation either. She is convinced that she went to sleep one night and woke up in a parallel universe that was altered slightly by small decisions that she had made. Honestly, after all of these stories, I think I kinda might believe her too. In our number 6 spot today, we have moving. So this story comes from Reddit, and it starts off one day when a guy gets a call from his neighbors asking him if he can help them move a mattress upstairs. They had a good relationship with the neighbors, so of course he was willing to help. When he got there, they got the mattress all moved, and the neighbors asked if he wouldn't mind helping with an armoire as well. No problem, he thought, as he began to help them move that one up the stairs as well. This is when things went awry, however. There were 11 stairs at the front, he was on the lower end carrying the armoire, and about 6 steps up his friend at the top lost a handle on it, and the whole thing came crashing down on him since he was of course at the bottom. He loses his balance and falls backwards towards the pavement, and this man actually remembers dying from this fall. The next thing he remembers though is waking up in his dining room with his phone ringing and his wife asking him if he's going to answer the phone. He is obviously super freaked out because he literally just remembers dying 2 seconds ago, but now he's here. When he answers the phone, it's his neighbor asking if he can help move a mattress up the stairs. He surprisingly goes over again to help, and when he gets there he says he can help with the mattress but not with the armoire. This neighbor is shocked because he doesn't know how he could have possibly known about the armoire. Did the guy have some sort of premonition, or did his death in one reality bring him into a different one? Who knows, but I hope he's taking advantage of this second lease on life. In our number 5 spot today, we have the breath. This Reddit post comes from the user cat22l, and they wrote, quote, "About 30 seconds ago I was sitting on the couch as my dog walked by to go sit on her bed we have behind the L part of the sectional. She had something small caught in her throat last night, I think a popcorn shell, so I was paying attention to her breathing just to make sure she got it out. For a few minutes she was breathing fine, and then what sounded like a light snore started happening. This is semi-normal for her depending on what position she's laying in, so I didn't bother to go over and check on her. That went on for about 5 minutes until the most disgusting, and to my now realization terrifying, snore/cough/wheezing sounds started happening. I go over to her to make sure she's okay, and the exact moment I looked at her bed, the sound stopped mid-breath and she wasn't there. She was outside with my parents and had been for around 30 minutes. There's no way to get out of the room without walking right past me. I don't know whose dog I saw and what was making that creepy ass sound 5 feet away from me, but I'm going to be staying outside for the rest of the day and hiring an exorcist. Maybe this is a weird parallel universe story, or maybe this is just a full-on demon. What do you guys think? In our number 4 spot today we have the road trip. One day in 2006, a woman named Carol was driving through San Bernardino, California on her way to Paris, California, where she was going to stay for a few days. On her travels, she saw a sign for Riverside, which was nearby, and she decided that since her family had roots there, maybe it was time to stop in for a visit. As she went into Riverside, she realized that everything looked different from how she remembered it, and she was unable to find her old house that she grew up in. She tried to go to the street that her grandmother used to live on, but that one was different too. And when she tried to visit her grandparents' graves at the cemetery, the whole place didn't even exist. Even the people who were living in the town gave Carol a bad feeling, and she didn't even want to get out of her car. She decided she would be better off just continuing on her trip, and she left Riverside. Carol didn't return to Riverside until a few years later after her dad had passed away and she was attending the funeral. To Carol's surprise, when she went to Riverside this time, everything was as she remembered it from her childhood. Carol believes that somehow that day she ended up in some sort of a parallel universe form of Riverside, and she even said that she felt like if she left her car that day, she was going to get stuck there. In our number 3 spot today we have the new location. So one day this person was driving to work on the same route that they took every single day. They worked the whole day through and got into their car to head back home on the same path. As they're driving, they start feeling super anxious and like on the verge of a panic attack. They keep driving and then they suddenly see this huge power plant all lit up. They're super confused because they drive this road every single day. How could they miss this glaringly obvious thing? Then their boyfriend calls and asks them to pick up McDonald's on the way home. No problem, they go through the drive-thru. When they get to the window, they see an employee they've never seen before, even though they are at this same McDonald's almost every single day, and this new employee is the only one there, and they say that they've been working there for around 2 months. They take the food and head home, and when they get there, they begin to tell the boyfriend about this strange power plant that they saw. Their boyfriend explains that it's always been there, so he doesn't know what they're talking about. Now every day they drive past this power plant with no idea how it got there or how they had missed it, but they've also noticed a few other small differences in their life. Their dog doesn't know the tricks it used to know, or how their boyfriend pronounces some words differently from before. Maybe they slipped into a new dimension on their drive home from work that day. In our number 2 spot today we have Honey. This story starts off with a woman who we'll call Anna having her bi-weekly phone call with her mom just to catch up and see what's going on. Anna's mom unfortunately had to inform her that Anna's sister's dog named Honey had passed away. Anna was obviously super upset at this loss and called her sister to check in after hearing the news. Anna asked tons of questions about where they were planning to bury her, as well as asking how her sister's son was doing with the loss. Anna told her boyfriend how upset she was about the loss of the dog, as they had really had a bond. Flash forward a couple of months and Anna is heading home for Thanksgiving. Her sister was heading out of town to spend the holiday with her in-laws, so she left her pets at the parents' house so that they could be watched over. As Anna walks into her parents' home, she sees Honey, healthy as can be, sitting in the living room. Anna was of course overjoyed, but asked her mom why she had told her that Honey died. Anna's mom was very confused and said that that conversation never happened. After leaving her parents, Anna asked her boyfriend and he said he was super glad that she brought it up because he also remembered this conversation. Did they somehow enter a world where Honey was still alive? While this would be such an amazing surprise, it would also be unbelievably creepy. In our number 1 spot today we have the crosswalk. Okay, maybe a parallel universe story, maybe a glitch in the Matrix story. Either way, when I came across this one on Reddit, it actually gave me goosebumps because it was just so strange. So let me set the stage for you. The original poster of this story, for a few weeks prior to this incident, had been noticing this sort of mundane thing that he found that many people did. The thing was how pedestrians will wait at a crosswalk until the walk sign comes on, and when it does, he was finding that people will usually pull their cell phones out of their pocket and look at them as they walk across the street. Nothing too strange there, it was just a thing that he had noticed. So flash forward to this specific incident, this guy is driving with his daughter. He goes on to write, quote, "We stopped at a red light at a crossing and there was a man standing there. Nothing out of the ordinary, denim jacket, black cap, glasses, around 6'2". I thought I'd try to weird out my young daughter. She's 5, so I knew this was going to blow her damn mind. So I said, see that man? When the walking man goes green and he starts to walk across, he'll reach into his pocket and pull out his phone and start looking at it. Watch and see." As he walks across, he reaches into his pocket, but then immediately takes his hand out and looks and points right at me with his mouth open, smiling like a gotcha stance. Of course, my daughter found this absolutely hilarious, and I sat there completely mind blown. I must have sat there in silence looking at him walk across for the next 10 seconds. I drove on and had a look at him as I drove past, and he was smirking and laughing. Of course, I'm thinking that he must have heard this guy somehow, but the poster goes on to say that the windows were up, the radio was on, his voice was at a completely normal volume, and this crosswalk guy would have been like 15 to 20 feet away. He finishes the post by saying, quote, "I can't figure out at all how he could have heard me. It's literally impossible. How did he know I was trying to predict he'd reach into his pocket for his phone? The only even remote possibility I can think of is that he has had the same observation as me and thought I might be thinking the same thing, so he just went for it. But realistically, what are even the chances of this?" This story truly is just an incredibly weird one.
At number 10 we have I Flew In From Torrid. Going to another universe sounds good, but you have no idea what's going to be on the other side. Maybe it's going to be really simple. Maybe it's a universe where everything is the same but everyone's left-handed. Or maybe it's a reality where the Nazis won the war and O.J. Simpson leads a fighting force in America against the Nazi forces. Well, the man from Torrid probably wished he stayed back in his universe. It was 1954 and a plane just landed in Tokyo. Everyone was getting off and everything seemed normal. But then one dude halted everything. Custom officials ran out and started investigating this one guy. He had all his documents, but he was from a country that didn't exist. It was a place called Torrid. The man in question said that it was a very real place and that he had flown from Torrid to Japan many times. At first glance, this guy seemed to be a whack job, but then the crazy thing was that all his paperwork was legitimate. He had official stamps on his passport to back all of his stories and claimed that the country of Torrid was squeezed right in between France and Spain. The custom officials in Japan were stumped, and I understand why. There isn't anything in the training manual about how to deal with interdimensional travel. So they escorted him to a hotel and he was not allowed to leave until the problem was sorted out. 2 guards stood outside of his door and he was on the 15th floor, so there was no way for him to sneak out of the building. In the morning the guards went in to take him out for more questioning and the dude was gone. He disappeared like a fart in the wind, and that was the end of the story. I guess he didn't like how strict we were in our dimension. At number 9 we have The Beatles Ain't Dead. These were the claims of James Richard after he took a trip down Abbey Road and ended up in a parallel universe where the Beatles were still kicking. To start off, I have to say that James Richard is not this guy's real name. He uses a fake name so the powers that be won't find him. But his story goes like this. He says that him and his dog were going for a stroll through the Del Puerto Canyon in California, and then out of nowhere he fell through a hole in space and time. He woke up in another version of Earth. He was in a hospital bed and there was a man named Jonas sitting next to him in the bed. And then Jonas started to give him the rundown on interdimensional travel. Through their discussions they started to talk about music, and it turns out that Richards was in an alternate version of Earth where the Beatles were still alive and cranking out tunes. James Richard even brought back a cassette tape with the music of this living Beatles band. The cassette was called Everyday Chemistry, and it sounds like he just spliced together some Beatles songs and some Wings songs, but who knows, maybe this is what the Beatles would have sounded like if 2 of their members never died. At number 8 we have the Dobbses. Frank and Althea Dobbs were the leading minds in a new scientific practice called chaos science. It's the idea that consciousness could possibly be its own universe. They started to pick up some steam and some other people decided to join their cause. They moved the team to a ghost town of Ong's Hat, New Jersey. Here they started to do research on interdimensional travel. I have to say this does sound like a cult. Well, cult or not, they claim that they've succeeded in this practice. It's said that they found a wormhole which led them to a parallel version of Earth that never had been consumed by humans, and they chose to stay there. Considering the state of the planet right now, I would say this was a very good choice. At number 7 we have Whose Life Is This? You go to sleep a happy lady and then you wake up and you're back with your ex-boyfriend? This sounds like a bender that you wish didn't happen, but for Lorena Garcia, this wasn't that at all. She woke up in her bed and she noticed a bunch of minor details were off. The setup of her room was a little off and her sheets weren't the ones that she loved. Never messed with a lady's sheets. Then her ex-boyfriend walked into the room, but the crazy thing is, it wasn't her ex. They never broke up and they were still together. After this, she was like, okay, this is crazy, but I gotta go to work. So she went into her job, and she had a different job and a different boss who was someone she had never seen before, and she couldn't explain any of this. At number 6, we have Riverside Down. I don't know how you can go through an interdimensional portal without noticing it, but apparently this happens quite a bit. Carol Chase McElhenney was driving through Cali when she decided to take a short trip to her hometown of Riverside to see how things never really change. It can always be a little bit of a shock to go back to where you grew up, but this time things had changed a lot. Actually, everything had changed. The layout of the town was the same, but all the houses were different. The home she grew up in was warped. She was concerned that she had taken a wrong turn, but she found her old school which she went to, which was exactly where it should be. But then she started noticing strange figures around the town, people who looked a little off and definitely creepy. This was enough for her, and then she sped out of there. She returned to this town at a later date and everything was back to normal, but she never forgot that time she slipped into a parallel dimension. At number 5, we have Interdimensional Cabin. No, this isn't another movie pitch from me, although this would have been an amazing movie pitch. There's a cabin in the Markawasi Stone Forest that is said to open up a door to a different time. Some women were hiking through the woods and they saw some people outside this cabin dancing and lighting torches. Before you run away in fear, they weren't lighting torches to get all angry mob, but it was because they didn't have any sort of modern technology. They were all dressed in clothes that looked like they were pulled out of the Spanish Golden Age. The people dancing eventually entered the cabin and the women went to investigate. One of the women walked halfway into the cabin and her friend grabbed her and pulled her out. She immediately fell to the ground and couldn't move half of her body. Half of her body was paralyzed. The women ran away, and some people speculate that the reason the woman couldn't move half of her body after she entered the cabin is because she entered another dimension halfway and then was pulled out, which caused her body to get all screwed up. I don't really know if there's good science on this. At number 4, we have What Road Is This? The crazy thing about all these stories is how calm people are when they get transported to another world. Pedro Olivia Ramirez was driving through Spain and was headed to the town of Alaca de Guadarira. This was a drive he could do on autopilot. He had done it so many times before, but this time something went terribly wrong. He made a usual turn that should have led him down a small road, but he was suddenly on a 6-lane highway. He didn't recognize any of this at all, and everywhere around him there was these buildings that seemed like they were pulled from another world. Eventually he pulled off the highway, and to his surprise he ended up in Alaca de Guadarira. He tried going back to find this highway, but he never could. See, if that was me, I would be swerving all over the road and then would pass out from a panic attack. At number 3, we have a wrong turn. When you go on a road trip, you probably want to go cross country, not cross dimensions. There were 4 girls driving through a desert in Nevada, and out of nowhere things started to get a little strange. They saw street signs that had an unknown language on them. They didn't have any sort of markings of any alphabet that any of them could recognize. So what's the best course of action when you end up in a strange neighborhood? Well, you ask for directions, you silly little goose. So they saw some dudes hanging out what looked like to be a truck stop diner, and they drove up beside them to ask them where they were. But then things got strange. These guys started to freak out, and it didn't take long for the women to realize that these guys were humanoids, but definitely not human. So they hightailed it out of there. This is when they started to get followed by some oval-shaped vehicles. The girl driving slammed on the gas, and she must have pushed it up to 88 because then they were back in Nevada, and the oval pursuers had vanished. At number 2, we have the Children of Woolpit. This story is bonkers. We're going back to the 12th century. Everyone in the town of Woolpit was chilling and doing a bunch of farm stuff and just trying to survive. You know what it was like back then. Then 2 kids came walking into town. They had green skin and spoke a gibberish language. The people took these kids in because they're kids and they seemed like they were terrified. They fed them, but the kids would only eat beans. Then not long after this, the boy of the 2 died. But the girl lived on. She eventually learned how to speak English and told everyone that she was from another world, somewhere where the sun never rose and it was perpetually twilight. She said she was on her father's farm and heard a crash, and then she was in Woolpit. She never found out where she was from, but she did eventually settle down and start a family. And for the number 1 spot, we have Shadow of a Doubt. Interdimensional travel is apparently impossible because space-time bends matter and light, but because of this bending of light, there is a chance that that we could see shadows from another dimension. This could have been what happened to a young woman who was living in Massachusetts. She said one night she saw a shadowy figure appear in her room out of her closet. The figure moved close to her and then was followed by another. And then another. Some of them were wearing strange clothes and one of them seemed to be wearing glasses. Then they started to surround her and she did the smart thing and hightailed it out of her room. Of course, you're not going to stick around with the ghost things. There could be the chance that these were some sort of beings peeking in from another dimension.